communication. We've already talked about unrealistic expectations, but let's go back to that for a second. When we don't communicate with our spouse, with our wives, up front what it is that we expect from the marriage, this is how disappointment could settle in, because you need to give that person the opportunity to tell you whether they're able to love you in said way. But one of the issues that we have is that we don't communicate well with ourselves as well, so we don't even know. We just go about life without knowing answers about ourselves, and so therefore it becomes very hard to communicate that with our spouse. Why marriages fail in the first 5 years. Hey guys, my name is Jaquan, and here on this channel, we help prepare men for marriage. Without further ado, let's talk about why marriages fail in the first 5 years and how you can avoid it. One thing I've noticed is that people idolize marriage. The thing with idolizing marriage oftentimes means that we don't properly prepare. We see marriage as a fairy tale of some sort. We have no idea. We didn't do our homework. We didn't talk to people who were married. We didn't maybe go through any type of counseling. We didn't prepare properly. So the fairy tale that we have in our mind, these unrealistic expectations that we have built up on what we thought marriage was going to be like. We would always think that you're going to be in a honeymoon phase. There's just certain things you did not consider before thinking about marriage. And so as a result, there's disappointment that settles in. And again, because we have idolized marriage. And when I say idolized marriage, this is my mindset about idolizing marriage. Whenever you are more obsessed with the idea of marriage as opposed to putting in the work to prepare for marriage, you've idolized marriage. Next thing is understanding your purpose for marriage. Like, why did you get married? It's not good enough to say that she looked good, or she comes from a good family, or she's got money, her body. Those are not good reasons as to why you got married. They don't do well with the purpose of why you got married. Number one, it's very important when you talk about the why you got married to that specific individual. If you don't know that reason why you married that specific individual, it's going to be very hard for you to understand your purpose on why you are married. Reason being is because, say it this way, when God chooses a spouse for us, he knows that these two have this specific goal to reach, or these things that they're supposed to do throughout their marriage, okay? Picking the wrong person throws that all off, because that person may not be able to complement you well and help you to get where you need to get, and vice versa. That's why understanding your purpose for marriage, why you even got married, but more specifically why you married that person, is extremely important. Again, not knowing this is a reason why marriages fail in the first 5 years. Love, and I break this up in two ways. Many of us don't understand love, okay? In the most general sense, we don't know how to love the way God intends for us to love. How are we supposed to love our brothers? How are we supposed to love our neighbor? How are we supposed to love family, right? That's one thing. But the other part is men. I'm talking to men now. We don't understand that God called us to love in a very specific way, okay? The Bible specifically speaks about us loving our wives like Christ loved the church. When you fail to understand that there are sacrifices that you're just going to have to make, when you fail to understand love in these very basic, fundamental ways, this is a reason why marriages fail. You don't understand what that love word means and what you have to give of yourself in order to make the marriage work. Communication. We've already talked about unrealistic expectations, but let's go back to that for a second. When we don't communicate with our spouse, with our wives, up front what it is that we expect from the marriage, this is how disappointment could settle in, because you need to give that person the opportunity to tell you whether they're able to love you in said way. But one of the issues that we have is that we don't communicate well with ourselves as well, so we don't even know. We just go about life without knowing answers about ourselves, and so therefore it becomes very hard to communicate that with our spouse. Another thing about communication is that we don't have effective communication. Just because two people are talking does not mean that you are communicating effectively. Oftentimes we communicate and we talk past each other. Oftentimes with my wife and I have stopped conversations because I realized the conversation was not effective at all. Or we've had 45-minute conversations and it was only the last 5 to 7 minutes of that conversation that it even began to be effective. We took 45 minutes or 37, 38 minutes breaking down our egos and listening to one another to understand what was being communicated. And another thing is that when you talk about communication is not being able to handle conflict well. Okay? Are you the type that insults your spouse when you get into a rift, when you get into an argument? Are you the type to say whatever out of your mouth that you want and that person is just supposed to take that and accept that? These are reasons why marriages fail. Sometimes we can go a bit too far with the things that we say and communicate out of our mouths. When you cross certain lines, it becomes very hard to come back from them at times. That leads to something that's similar but different in its core as well, which are boundaries. Okay? When we fail to establish boundaries in our relationship, that can lead to the demise of the marriage as well. Example, maybe your in-laws have too much of a say-so in your marriage. Maybe you run to your in-laws or to friends to get pointers about your marriage. Now, we're going to talk about marriage mentors in a second, but a marriage mentor can be very different from who you run to at the spur of a moment to talk about a grievance within your marriage. But there are certain boundaries that need to be kept so that your marriage doesn't fail. Another example of that is maybe you have friends of the opposite sex and you talk to them about your marriage. Certain things like that, you have to establish boundaries, because if not, the lines could be blurred. That's one of the issues when it comes to boundaries, is that there could be blurred lines somewhere. Okay, you want to avoid that at all costs. As I mentioned just a little while ago, you're going to need a marriage mentor. Marriages typically fail, again, because we don't establish those boundaries of what to share, what not to share, and who to share them with. If you have a marriage mentor, this is typically somebody who you would imagine the both of you would trust. But either way, if it's just me and I trust a specific individual, I trust this person because I know they're going to help me stay married, or they're going to give me advice that helps me to stay married, not give me advice that tells me that I should throw away my marriage. The problem is many of us do not have a marriage mentor, and as a result, this is a reason why a marriage can fail within the first 5 years. Some of the toughest fundamental years it can fail. Another reason I feel is that prayer. I think, and I'm going to talk to my men for a second, we didn't pray enough before we got married, and then we carried that same habit of not praying or not praying enough with more responsibility on us. Okay? Prayer is one of those things that you need, because guess what? Talk about a lot of sacrificing and how to love, and you don't get that all on your own. You need something that is able to help you to do that thing that oftentimes seems so very hard, which is to love, which is to forgive, because forgiveness is a part of love. Being able to hit your knees and say, God, I need your help, because if I don't get your help, I cannot be the man that you have called me to be and want me to be in this marriage to this woman. This leads to the next thing, which is spiritual leadership. As the husband, again, talking to my fellas, you have to know that there is a target on your back because you are the spiritual leader. So that means praying, fasting, reading your Bible, understanding how you're supposed to love, understanding the type of sacrifices that you're going to need to make, being the one that when everybody is asleep, you're on your knees or you're walking your house praying because you see the attacks on your family. And none of my fellas that are listening to this right now, you ain't no punk. So you're not going to allow anybody to just come against your family. Guess what? I'm not just talking about someone, a physical person. I'm talking about spiritually. Your marriage will be attacked. And when you know that that is the case, you better strap up, you better pray, you better fast, you better read your Bible, because those are the reinforcements as a spiritual leader of your house that you will need. But again, if you're not even at that level to realize I need something bigger than me to help me to keep this marriage, it's one of the reasons why marriages fail within the first 5 years. Lastly, most importantly, having the mentality that divorce is not an option. This is one of the things that I said to my wife: divorce can't be an option. Specifically because we come from being divorced, both my wife and I. And so with that being said, we wanted to make sure that we don't go down that road again. We wanted to make sure that for the purpose of why we got married, that we carried that out. All right? So again, having the mentality that divorce is not an option as a very important reason as to why marriages fail, is because that is oftentimes an option that is just there. You've got all these different types of things you can choose: having a marriage mentor, doing counseling, doing the work on yourself to better yourself within the marriage. But we choose oftentimes to pick up divorce. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people should stay in abuse. I'm not saying that you should even necessarily stay when there's infidelity in the relationship. But what I'm speaking outside of those things. Those aren't the only reasons why people are getting divorced. So I say to you, before you even enter into divorce, before you even enter into a relationship, before you enter into that marriage, you should make sure that you have the mentality that divorce is not an option. There's two sides to that. With divorce not being an option, that there's certain things that I will not do to cause a divorce. Again, like violence against my wife, cheating, infidelity. Those are things that you want to avoid so that divorce doesn't have to be an option. Or more importantly, so that you don't have to, if you're going to make it work, have to dig through all of that stuff to get through just so you can move forward in your marriage. So hey guys, I've just given you some reasons why marriages fail within the first 5 years. I want to encourage those that are not married that you make sure that you try to avoid these things so that you can have a healthy marriage. For those of us who are married, that we can try to work on areas where we may be weak, where we could become better. I wrote a book that got published on April 1st of this year. On the screen, you're going to see the opportunity where you can scan a QR code and go ahead and pick up that book. Consider to subscribe to this channel for more advice on how to prepare for marriage and how to stay married.